In an AI-driven world where data is the currency, invincible chips power every breakthrough. But in a world built on silicon, the ultimate question remains: who designs the heart of the machine? Skyechip commenced IC design operations in 2020, led by two semiconductor industry veterans who each bring over 20 years of experience. The company specializes in the design and development of cutting-edge silicon IPs and silicon products. Skyechip's IP portfolio ranges from high-speed interfaces to network-on-chip interconnect IPs, specifically engineered for high-performance computing and artificial intelligence.
Our greatest asset is not just our technology or the chips we design. It is the brilliant minds behind it. Skyechip is home to a team of skilled engineers and industry veterans, united and guided by our core values, which we call Top Ref.
With over 360 IC designers and more than 110 patents filed across US, China, and Malaysia since inception, Skyechip has built a fortress of IPs.
With our in-house developed proprietary software supporting the configuration of our network-on-chip IP into our customers' ICs, we don't just design microchips. We engineer the foundational building blocks of tomorrow's technology.
From architecture design to tape-out and volume production, the team at Skyechip works as one force to build the ASIC chips that powers tomorrow.
Skyechip is ready. We'll invest in R&D to expand our silicon IP portfolio and to deliver highly competitive IC products through Malaysian innovation.
From Penang to the world, Skyechip is scaling rapidly by setting the global standards for tomorrow's technology.
Welcome back, everyone, and good evening. I hope you had your dinner already. Welcome back to our exclusive IPO investor briefing session. Today, we have invited a very special company that I think we as Malaysians should be proud of. Now, this company is a company that is going to list at an IPO price of 88 cents, very auspicious number, with an expected market capitalization of 1.6 billion. The company is specialized in silicon IP design as well as silicon products. But I'm not going to go into too much details. I will leave the juicy part to the management to explain. Today, we are very proud to have two management team with us here. First of all, we have Dato Fong Swee Kiang, CEO of the company. Hi, Dato. And also, we have Mr. Galvin Wong, the Finance Director of the company. All right, before we start, I just want to do a very quick disclaimer. Today's session is solely for educational purposes only. There should not be any buy, sell, or hold recommendation. Okay, so if you are really interested in a company, I know everyone should be. So if you have any questions, you can ask your advisor, or you need to make your own investment decision. All right. So this is again, this is an education session only, right? So without further ado, let us jump into the session today. Now, if you have any questions that you would like to ask the company, feel free to leave it in the comment box below. I'm over here holding the iPad. I'm looking at your questions, and we will look into your questions at the tail end of this session. Now, before we go into the technical parts, before we go into something more too technical, first of all, Dato SK, how do you start this journey? I know you have 35 years in the industry. Your partner has over 20 years in semiconductor. So can you walk us through how do you start the company and how do you build it to such a scale?
Okay. We started the company in 2019 when I was in Broadcom. Right? And that was a time where we see that AI is starting to take shapes. And it's, in fact, 2020 was the beginning of the AI super cycle. But the signal is already very strong that in 2019, there's a lot of opportunity coming out from three perspectives. One is that AI is going to be the next growth driver of semiconductor. And secondly is that the deglobalization of the semiconductor is happening. When deglobalization happened, it created opportunity for new companies to capture the market, right? What I say about deglobalization is that before that, you can see that Silicon Valley basically command the whole world's market, right? But with the ongoing the technologies, war and so on, the market somehow is split into different segments. Right? There'll be a US Chip Act, there'll be a China independence on IC, and there'll be a European Chip Act, and some other country also try to get certain autonomy. Right? So with that, the market is segmented and it creates a lot of opportunity for newcomers. And thirdly is that when we look at the talent that we have in Malaysia, we really have the talent that can actually capture this opportunity. So in short, I would say that it's a combination of we have the right talent, we have the right technology which is aligned to the high growth AI super cycle, and thirdly, we have the market that's open to accept new companies.
Yeah, indeed. We see a lot of deglobalization, especially on China Plus One initiative and also the geopolitical tension. Now, before we go into a bit more technical part, could you briefly introduce the company in simple terms? So what does the company actually do? We know that the company is doing the silicon IP design, silicon product design. You also do ASIC. So how should investors understand the business?
Okay. So first of all, Skyechip is a player in the semiconductor industry. Okay.
Mic can closer. Yeah, the mic can be a bit closer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Skyechip is a player in semiconductor industry, and in today's landscape, semiconductor is a backbone for every activities. Okay. So remember Skyechip as IC design companies that sit in the upper stream of the whole ecosystem. Right? If you look at semiconductors industry, it can divide into three segments. The lower end is the test and manufacturing, which is actually very familiar with a lot of investors because they have company listed and become a unicorn in this area. In fact, they are our role model. Right? How can they actually go into a unicorn? Right? So in the middle part is a fabrication parts, high capital investment, but only a few small players can take part, and only some company or countries that have deep pockets, you can take part in that. But then the best opportunity is actually in the IC design side, and this is asset light, talent intensive, right? So Skyechip, you want to remember what is Skyechip? Skyechip is an IC design company that sit on the upper end of the whole semiconductor ecosystem, riding on the high growth of the AI super cycle.
All right, thank you so much. Now, Dato, you mentioned that Penang is actually well known for back-end semiconductor manufacturing, right?
Yeah.
And Skyechip is in the more front end, we would say, which is in the chip design. So for beginners, could you explain a bit more, maybe in terms of back end or maybe in front end? Yeah.
Okay, I just continue what I mentioned just now. So semiconductor can divide into back end, middle end, and the front end, right? And if you look at who are the players in this, most of the company in Malaysia are in the back end. Right? They are doing assembly and test manufacturing, and there's also a lot of companies doing the automations to support the assembly and test manufacturing. Right? And the middle end, you know about name like TSMC, Samsung, and even Intel is trying to be a player in the middle end by being a foundry vendor or foundry supplier. And the top end is very simple. The world's most valuable company, NVIDIA, is at the upper end of the semiconductor ecosystem.
Right.
Not only NVIDIA, there's company like Broadcom, Qualcomm, AMD, MediaTek, so on and so forth. Right? So for Skyechip, our aspirations is to sit in the upper end of the semiconductor industry. We'll compete with players at the global level with our own technologies and with our own strength.
Right. Thank you so much. All right. The next question will be, if you look into the prospectus, we can see a lot of slightly I would say, technical terms for new investors, right?
Yeah.
We have terms like IP, we have terms like IC, ASIC, DDR, high bandwidth memory, HBM. So can you maybe explain a bit in simpler terms? Now everyone is talking about data center, right? So what do all these items take role in a data center, perhaps?
Okay. So the best thing actually, I think most of the reader will do is go and do a chat GPT on what's IP, IC, ASIC, and DDR, HBM. But to keep things very simple, IP is a building blocks. Like imagine Mercedes, right? Mercedes, they don't design every components in the car. The tire maybe was supplied by Michelin, and then the engine block may be done by Mercedes, but the infotainment may be done by Bosch, right, or Sony, right? So a chip is like this. We supply the component that's needed to build the chips, and the customer put their most important IP into the chip to create that complete chip per se, right? So IC is integrated circuit. So in short, we call it chips, right? ASIC is a combination of application-specific IC. So it's one form of IC that target and optimize for certain applications. And DDR and HBM is a memory technology that cater for different applications. DDR or LPDDR, they are for low power applications, edge computing applications. You can see that in your handphone, in your laptop, maybe in your car infotainment, right? And then for HBM, high bandwidth memory, they belongs to the data center. They belongs to the AI chip. It belongs to the AI center where you need a lot of data to be transferred and stored from the CPU to the memory through the HBM interface. Right? So in a way, DDR is for common application, broad market. HBM is for specialized market. Both is for storage purposes. Right?
All right.
And if you look at data center chips works, the data center chips, as I said, will consist of a multiple IP, and Skyechip supply to about 2 or 3 of them. Right? One is the IP that talk to the memory, and one of the IP is controlling the traffic inside the chips, right? So in a data center, like for example, when you run Moomoo, a lot of data is being processed. So those data need to be stored in a memory and then processed by the CPU or the processor. Our IP basically handle the interface between the memory and the CPU.
I see. I see. So it's about when CPU is processing for, I think everyone understands CPU, right? We are using a computer.
The computer, the chip that you plug in.
Yes, yes. If you are watching on the phone, probably on the phone too. So it's between the memory segment and also the communication to the CPU. So back and forth.
All right.
All right. All right. That's very cool. Right. On the next question, maybe we can have one real life example, right, of how Skyechip's technology helps to power a particular product or power a particular system. That would, I think that would helps in visualizing what does the company really do.
Okay. I'm not going to talk about how the chip works. Let me give an analogy of how a city as a chip, right? So in the city, you have infrastructure. You have hospital, you have police station, you have shopping mall, and you maybe have a train station, and you have a residential area, right? All this infrastructure need to be connected so that people can be moved, goods can be moved, right? Service can be provided. So one of our IP called network on chips is like the highway system in the city. It connects all the components inside the chip to make sure that the data is being transferred and processed in the most efficient manner. Then we also have a IP called memory interface IP. We just mentioned DDR or HBM. These are like the C port or the A port, where if you need to export and import goods, you need a very efficient C port or A port, right? So our memory interface serves as the port that allow the city to import and to export goods. So in a way, we basically control how efficient the chip will do the computing, because we control the data inside the chip, and we also control how the chip is going to read and write the data from the memory.
Right, I think that's very important in nowadays era, especially everyone. If you have a slightly slow loading, right, you will start complaining. Just imagine in a data center scale. Okay, so what do you think, Dato? What do you think is Skyechip's strongest technical capabilities, in your opinion?
Okay. If you look at Skyechip, we are not born 6 years ago. I will say the Skyechip team was built over the last 30 years. Why am I saying that? Because when the MNC started to invest in Malaysia since 1972, they bring the first wave of assembly and test manufacturing. And then in the late 1980s to early 1990s, they started to do IC design, right? In fact, I'm the first engineer sent to US from Intel to learn about IC design.
Oh,
right? And since then, the IC design activity has continued to grow. And today, I say Penang will have maybe 3,000 to 4,000 IC design engineers, right? And some of these engineers has actually accumulated very, very deep technical expertise. And that technical expertise is the one that enables Skyechip to compete at a global level, right? In a way, I would say that our engineer in Skyechip are doing the same level of complexity as engineer in the Silicon Valley, right? So that capability is the foundation on how Skyechip can compete at a global level.
yep. If I'm not mistaken, you can also see Skyechip's name in some of the competitors' annual report. If I'm not
Definitely.
mistaken, yeah. So you would know who are the competitors for those who are asking the question. Now, we talk about IP, we talk about ASIC for a bit. So how does because all the IP, silicon IP that is created is owned by the company itself. So how does owning an IP also helps you in growing your ASIC, or we call silicon product segment as well, or vice versa?
Okay. So first of all, silicon IP is a building block to the chips, right? As a company who want to pursue a silicon product business, there's two ways you can do it. The first is you license all the component you need from a third party and build it into a chip. And another way is you create your own differentiations because you have certain IP that you master and is cutting edge, and it allow you to control your own destiny, right? So for Skyechip, our preference is to be a product company that have our own IP that create differentiations. Right? We think by having our own IP and having a competitive IP, we are positioned in a much favorably compared to a product company that don't have IP at all. Right?
Yep. Can we say that if your competitor want to compete with you in, let's say, ASIC, but they would rely on one of the building blocks of the ASIC, right, which is your memory IP. So they would need to get the licensing from you to use that. So that would also be your competitive advantage when you are going for the same project. Can we say that?
You can say that as long as legally we can do that.
Okay.
Because there's also anti-competitive, antitrust rules. But as long as a company is concerned, we can use our cutting-edge IP to win the deal. I give you examples. Our network on chip IP is one of the best in the industry, right? So we have a customer who need this network on chips technical strength. And for us, we say that since you're using our network on chip, why not let us build the chip for you? It become an easy sell rather than why not I do the chip for you at a lower cost, but I will still have to source IP from third party. But for Skyechip, we can offer saying that use our IP, which give you certain competitive advantage. And since we know the IP, it's easier for us to build the chip for you. So having an IP and having an ASIC design, they're actually complementing each others.
All right. For layman, for me to understand is that Pao Kaliao is easier.
Pao Kaliao is easier
for you to get some customers. All right. So I think there's a couple of questions also asking. I will consolidate your questions. Don't worry, I'm looking at your questions, right? A lot of investors, they are not sure how does the company make money, right? The company is obviously not in manufacturing. So your revenue, when we talk about licensing, is it project based? Is it license based? Is it recurring, or is it one-off basis?
Okay. So for IP, we have two types of business. We have silicon IP business. We also have silicon product business. Let me explain what is a silicon IP business. When we design the IP, we design it to international specifications, right? So customer who want to use this IP can use it without worry that whether it's compatible. Just like our USB, right? You will never think that when I plug in my USB device whether it will work, because that USB is defined by international standard. Same for IP. So when we design those IP, we design to the international standard, and then we license it to our customer by collecting a licensing fee. Right? For some of the customer that we know, they are just at the startup level, we are not going to pursue the royalty, but we prefer to collect the payment upfront. Right? But when this company grow into a bigger size, when they have a visible volume, then our business model will be a combination of licensing fee and royalty. Right? We optimize these two payments to make sure that it's fair to the customer, but also it's beneficial to Skyechip.
All right. So can we say that, just for the sake of understanding, right, royalty is on per unit basis on how much they make using your technology,
Yeah.
and on licensing basis is one of, for example, 3 to 5 years they are able to use your technology.
No, only for one project.
1 year.
One project.
One
not
project.
1 year.
Okay.
If 1 year you have two projects, you need to license 2 times.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's cool. Okay. Next, we're seeing again, as we mentioned just now, data center is a hot topic, and HBM specifically has been talking about a lot of shortage and everything. So how should I know you guys are very strong in terms of memory. So how can an investor understand your opportunities in the HBM related sector?
I would say that the opportunity actually is not just limited to HBM sector. The opportunity actually is propelled by the super AI cycle. Right? So for super AI cycle, you need a very efficient memory interface system. You need also a die-to-die interface system, because in the modern chips, you have more than one die inside the package. You also need a very efficient data traffic system in your chips. So I will not just limit it to memory technology. I will rather say is that Skyechip, we have the key technologies that's needed to build a high performance computer chips, or a high performance edge AI, or a data center AI chip.
Okay. All right. So, in your opinion, right, just for sharing and based on your years of experience, where do you think investors should put their focus or pay closer attention in terms of semiconductor for the next few years?
Oh, this is a very broad question.
Broad-based question, yes.
I would say as an investor, you probably want to invest in IC design company, because IC design company is talent heavy, asset light. Right? And this talent and asset light model continue to allow us to keep track of the advancement of the technology as long as the engineer can learn. Versus if you're just a manufacturing company or equipment heavy company, every generation of the technology may force you to upgrade your equipment, right, which is capital intensive, right? Or you have to stay through by keeping your costs low and your pricing low by reusing old equipment. So I prefer to be in the trend where human is full of potential, right? So as long as they learn, they'll continue to advance themselves, and as long as they advance themselves, they can actually maintain to be competitive without having to worry about capital expenditures. Right? So, but in order to identify IC design companies, I think that there's 3 important elements that you need to look out for. First of all is the IC company, are they working on cutting edge technology? Right? So do they file patents? Do they file patents on the technologies that essential, or do they file patent on the technologies that's of high growth? In this case, AI, right? So that's one. And second thing is, do they have the talent, right? So if the talent is all junior people or do not have the relevant experience, then there's not much technology they can offer, right? And the third one is, do they have a market? Right? So all these are very important and they are super enforcing each other's. But even more importantly is, do they have the ecosystem support? So as IC company, I need to make sure that when I design the chips, I can fabricate it or build it. So having foundry support, especially foundry support with advanced process technology is very important. And having OSAT support and advanced OSAT support, OSAT stands for outsourced assembly and test. Right? Having OSAT support is also very important because it's through this advanced OSAT you build your advanced package chips. Right? So these are the few elements that if you want to invest, you invest in IC company. But if you invest in IC companies, watch out for some of these key considerations.
Yep, that'll be very helpful. Also, I think for talent retention, someone talk about talent retention, and I thought I mentioned two very important elements. The first one being the patent being filed. I believe the company is filing for 110 plus IP.
113 patent today.
Yeah, and 36 of them has been approved, and 77 outstanding. Yeah, that's a very important indicator when you want to look for IP related companies. And also the second part is that the company also have access to the 3 nanometer process node technology that your partners would provide the PDK. These are the things that a IP design company that you should look for, right? Some of the things. So, okay, the next question would be, I know everyone will ask about this question, so I prepared in advance, right? Does just give me a moment. Okay. Yeah. Does Skyechip have any dividend policy? And how does the company actually balance between growth and also rewarding the shareholders?
Okay. So first of all, our shareholder is not only the shareholder that buy our shares outside of the company. In fact, our employees is our shareholders, right? So what we believe is that in order for the employee to fully commit to the company visions, they need to be shareholders. So we have a very generous equity scheme where employee can actually subscribe to our stock options. Right? Now we talk about dividend. Right? To me, referencing to a lot of high growth company in the Silicon Valley, dividend is the last thing. Issuing dividend is actually the last thing that they will do. Right? When they have so much opportunity to grow, the obvious choice is to actually pour back whatever you earn to do further R&D so that you can capture more market, you can continue to advance your solutions. And through this advancing of the solutions and for this broadening of your market, your return to your shareholder is much better than paying them a dividend and having them to put the money in the FD. Right? So to us, growth and continue to grow, sponsored by the earning that we have, is a primary focus. Right? When in one day, maybe Skyechip, when our growth stagnant, then we will start paying dividend. But when the time happen, you may want to consider investing in another company.
Okay. I think the key point here is to look for potential capital gain. I'm not saying that guarantee capital gain. To look for potential capital gain to ride along with the growth of the company. And based on the track record of the company, I believe the company would put the cash into good use. Right. So the next question is, I will leave actually the next question. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think your hand also a bit tired.
tired.
Yeah. So I will leave the question to the last of this section. We will now jump into taking the questions from the public. I saw so many questions, right? So before that, maybe just want to do a quick reminder for those who are interested in the company, right? Just give me a moment. Let us change the slide. have already subscribed. I myself, obviously, I have conflict of interest. I already subscribed. But if you are subscribed, you can type in a yes. But if you have not, this is your first time seeing the company, or you are on the fence, you do not know whether to go to or to not go to, right? So you can type in the 2. Just want to see how many of you already have skin in the game. Okay, so if you have any further questions about the subscription, please feel free to leave your comment below so the Moomoo team can contact you. If you have any further questions, we will now move into the public Q&A portion. All right, so keep your questions pouring in. We still have some time for the public Q&A. Now, I think this question for Galvin has been sitting here for half an hour. now is the time for you to take one question. Yeah, now is the time for you to shine. There's an investor here, Fabian, has been asking about gross margin. Gross margin has maintained at a very high level over the past couple of years. But with increasing competition in the AI chip market, customer bargaining power, I'm not sure if that is applicable to the company, right? How do you see the gross margin would do or would perform in the going future, right? Just a high level understanding.
I think if you look at our recently today released prospectus, you would see that gross margins, I think on October 2025 basis compared to October 2024, it dipped slightly 2 percentage points. But I think the more important thing is to look at net margin, because that's where the net profits are. And if you look at that, net margins, actually they've been stable year on year. So I think profitability has been consistent on our side. And on top of that, we've grown actually 39.5% top line year on year. And that, because margins are stable, that's actually contributed to 40% profit growth year on year. Yeah. So margins, looking at our October numbers, have been very stable.
All right. All right. Thank you so much. And when we talk about competitiveness in a company, we talk about margin, right? I think, Dato, you could share a bit. When a new competitor would like to, there are some questions about competitive landscape, right? When a new competitor, they want to enter into, say, the HBM segment, how far is the runway for them to just catch up, not to pass you guys, just to catch up to the company? How far is the runway?
Okay, so the beauty of the IP business is that when you when you design the first IP, that is actually the hardest. Like for example, HBM3. It takes us about 1.5 years to design the HBM3. But for every upgrade or every new generations, you can actually use the foundation that you have built and you just add on top of it, right? So for example, now we are already at HBM4, right? And for competitor to come in and start to build a HBM4, it's almost like you have to climb the HBM3 hill, followed by HBM3E hill, and to the HBM4, right? So time-wise, Skyechip definitely have the advantage because we already have a base and we just do incremental, so it's less resources and shorter durations. For competitor, you have to prepare to spend more time and more resources, right? So that created some natural competitive advantage for Skyechip.
Right, and this competitive advantage is also very important for those who are asking about margin in protecting the company's margin. Now, the next question will be about your new customer momentum. If you look at the prospectus, obviously because of a disclosure reason, I believe the management couldn't share with you who are the customers. I saw a lot of questions asking about customers. But can you share in terms of your current, can we call it order book? What's the order book size, right, that you have now? And perhaps you can talk about your diversification strategies in terms of, if I look at your customer base, actually they are rotating year by year. There won't be a fixed client that contributes over the past few financial years.
Some points. So I think you asked about order book. We have disclosed in the prospectus that our order book is about 130 million currently. And bulk of it, about 94.6 million, will be recognized actually in this coming financial year. Right? So there's very strong momentum in terms of the order book. And talking about diversification, the business has actually diversified by across customers, across projects, and across geographies. So in FY23, we actually had 4 customers. In FY25, we had 14. Now, October 2025, we announced that we had 18 customers. So October alone, 7 months, we already have more customers than the full year FY25. Right? Projects even higher than the 18 number. And we also start seeing revenue contribution from North America. North America contribution was about 5.7% in October. So the business is diversifying geographically across projects and across customers, even as we scale. Scale on that.
I think when you mention about across projects, it's actually across IP. So from a company in the beginning that we only have one IP, now we have 4 main IP. Each of these IP actually can stand alone as a business, but we have 4 of them. Yeah. Or namely, our memory interface IP HBM, our LPDDR interface IP, our network on chip IP, our die-to-die IP.
All right. Thank you so much for the answer. I believe that's very clear. I think Dato, you can hold higher. Some of them I think have
Cannot hear.
Yeah, a bit slightly. Yeah. Okay, when we talk about the industry as a whole, right? I think this is an overall competitive landscape question. I think this has been answered partially at our conversation just now. Maybe I go into the second part. What's your strategy in the way we see a lot of our IPO proceeds will be poured into further R&P? Now, based on your experience and the years of running the company, how do you select where to deploy the capital to ensure that's a good return from the R&D, that the money that you're put in?
Okay. So if you look at our prospectus, we have 4 growth areas. And this growth area is not like imagined from the sky. It's actually a very common sense approach. First of all, is as IP company, we will continue to expand our IP portfolio. Right? So there's one area that after have 4 IP for high performance computing, you can be sure that we'll be finding opportunity to build another IP which is aligned to high performance computing, or not 1 IP, 2 IP or 3 IPs. Right? That's a natural directions. And another area is we are going to grow beyond AI and high performance computing. In fact, EV to me is a high performance computer on wheels, right? So if our IP can be used on high performance computing, we can actually port it to be used on the computer on wheels, right? So that's talking about taking our IP and qualify it on the 26262 specifications, so that we can actually expand our market from the data center, from the high performance computing applications into EV and automotive, right? And the third one is actually we are going into a trend where computing is not one chip alone. If you look at the modern data centers, a lot of these data centers are powered by NVIDIA chip, AMD chip, Intel chips. But there's also a trend where this data center need a custom-built chips, so that in combination, you can actually get the data center even more efficient, more cost-effective, and also lower power consumptions. And this is a business model that we are pursuing.
All right, I think that's a very good answer. Especially, it's very interesting when we talk about HBM on wheels. Sorry, high processing
computer
power
on wheels.
Yeah, computer on wheels. Sorry.
Yeah.
So there's another question about your talent retention, which I believe is quite clear that you have a very good compensation plan that you mentioned just now towards your talent retention plan. Maybe you want to talk about when you just started, there is a very senior group of people that join you who sticks with the company until now. So how do you actually retain them?
Okay. I will actually group it into talent retention and also talent sourcing, right? Because by retaining the current talent, it will not be enough for us to scale our business or to grow business. So beside retaining our talent, we also want to continue to inject new talents to the company. So the vehicle that we use is a combination of cash and also equity, right? And this model again is borrowed from the Silicon Valley. Now, in the Silicon Valley, in the last 50 years, successful company retain their employee and share their success and make the employee a shareholder by giving stocks options to the employees. And in this case, the burden to the company is less because it's not consuming the cash. The reward actually is coming from the market, right? When you're performing, your business is growing, the shareholder reward you by increasing your share price. And indirectly, they are rewarding our employee who contributed to the success, right? So that's one way. So it's not burdening the company in terms of cash, but at the same time, because of the stock power, it helps us to retain the employees. At the same time, it also attracting new employee who want to have a good job. Good job means that technically they are challenging, technically they are rewarding, at the same time financially it's promising, right? Success translate into more wealth for them, right? So the retention power is through a combination of cash and stocks. And we are not only looking at retention, but we are looking into growing the talent pool.
Yeah, now the workforce is around 300 plus, right?
391.
391. Wow, that's a huge team.
Mhm.
Now, the next question that comes in is on your competitive advantage. Is there any disclosed market share in the prospectus in terms of IC design?
We don't disclose the market share.
All right.
Actually, it's a very complicated because our business is so broad. It's not like just one business segment. We are in the IP segment, and the IP segment divided to memory, network on chips, die to die, and also LPDDR, right? Then in the silicon segment, it's divided into maybe the AI accelerator segment, the custom compute segment, the 2.5D, 3D segment. So it's a very broad market segment that we are in. Right?
Yeah, it's not your typical manufacturing that
We,
value can
at
determine.
our scale, honestly, we are still a very, very small company compared to the existing players, right? So we are not worried about how much market share we captured. We are focusing on how much revenue we can grow. Right?
I think the runway is still very long.
Very long.
Yeah,
very long.
All right, that's a question. I think probably go back to Galvin. It's on the tax exemption, which I think has expired by last year September.
September.
Yeah, what's the latest status in terms of the tax exemption?
We are still working with the government on this application. But I think also in the prospectus, what we've mentioned, actually, we have applied for and we also actually received income tax exemption in Vietnam.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's combination of having in Vietnam and continuing to work on the Malaysian income tax exemption. A new tax exemption in Malaysia.
All right. I think we'll stay tuned in terms of the tax benefits. All right. The next question is, I think this is, I wouldn't say it's export focused, right, for the company, but if you look at the revenue generated, I think 90+% is in US dollar, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right.
And how has the company been affected by the current geopolitical risk and also the currency fluctuation? I think it's a two-part question. First, we talk about the currency fluctuation because your input, you also buy 80% in terms of US dollar, I believe.
Yeah.
How does that have a natural hedge in terms of currency fluctuation? Then we go into second part, which is the geopolitical risk.
So maybe I cover the currency part. So the currency bit, you're right, more than 80+%, closer to 90% of our revenue is actually US dollar. So the weakening of the US dollar has had impact on us over the past 2 years. But yet, you can see our compounded revenue growth rate the past 3 years has been close to 45%. And even in October, we grew by close to 40%. So what's actually been happening is that the US dollar revenue growth rate of the business has been faster than that 40% that you're seeing. So the Forex rate has had an impact. That's why you see in ringgit, it's come down to 40%. But the underlying business growth has actually been faster. The momentum has been quite strong. Yeah.
Right.
So we've sort of been able to offset that by growing.
Yeah, if you look at the absolute number, I think it's quite not very significant in terms of the impact. Yeah. So maybe on Dato, you want to talk about the geopolitical risk?
I think for the geopolitical risk, every business will have risk, right? The important thing is that diversification is always our focus, right? So because of the deglobalization of the semiconductors, the market is divided at least into 4 main pieces, right? So while we are doing business, it's very important that we stay within the guardrail of the US government export control, right? And we always be mindful that who we do business with and who we don't do business with, right? At the same time, we also continue to expand our market in US, in Japan, in Korea, or Taiwan, or in Europe. It's all in our plan, right? So diversification is a key, right? And also make sure that
we always stay within the guide rails. Yeah.
Right. I think that's also very important. Now, I like this specific username, road to 1 million. So I think also a bit clarification in terms of can Skyechip design CPU, GPU, or TPU? I think maybe a bit of clarification on that.
Yeah. Actually, if you attend the prospectus launch speech, I have said that Skyechip want to be Broadcom of Malaysia. Right? If you look at the Broadcom business, Broadcom, one of the division in Broadcom is actually focusing on custom compute and AI accelerator hardware. Right? It's not competing with big player or established player in the GPU side or in the CPU side, but it play a complementary role to allow the overall system to be more efficient and more cost effective. Right? So if you want to take a single message, we are not trying to be NVIDIA of Malaysia, or we are not trying to be AMD, but we rather play a complementary role so that we provide our customer, our system customer, the best value for their investment. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. Another question is coming in about your China side, right? So far, based on your operating, is there any delay, any I don't think there is any cancellation because of the US export control, right? Any impact due to the US export control so far?
So far, we haven't seen any. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's look at the, okay. I think there's a question about your standard silicon IP licenses. You already explained the difference between one-time and also future royalties, potential royalties. I think that's a lot of answer. Right. Let me look at more questions. There are also questions that are asking your potential CAGR growth, but I don't think the management can answer. Yeah, I don't think the management can answer. But what I can ask for you is, Dato, can you share again in terms of your growth plans for the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years?
Okay, I think again, if you read the prospectus, our growth plan and growth strategy is clearly stating that we will continue to play out to our strength. We will expand our IP portfolio that's relevant to AI and high performance computing. We will expand into new applications, which is relevant to automotive and EV. Like we are focusing on the custom compute and AI accelerator hardware that allow us to help the system company to achieve a better and more efficient system. And we also will focus on advanced packaging solutions, where in the modern chips, we have more than one chip in a package. There's some chips that are designed by a company, and then there's some chips that are reusable. So our goal is actually design those reusable chips and make it a new business, right? And that is also aligned with Malaysia's direction of advanced packagings, to build an advanced packaging ecosystem. Right?
Yep. And also the question is about, if you look at the recent announcement and also news, this question is about what partnerships do you have with other major companies? Now, in prospectus, I can see names like a Samsung, and also we can see names like ARM, and also we can see names like there's a Intel partnership program, if I'm not mistaken. So can you share in terms of all three collaborations, what are they for?
I won't be able to give details, right? If you want, I think the prospectus will be the best source of your informations. But as a small and emerging players, we are leveraged on the big players to help our growth and also to help our competitiveness. But in return, we need to add value back to our partners. So we always seek a win-win partnerships, right? To continue to tap into their strength. At the same time, we contribute to their success or to their business using our strength. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think this is a question for Galvin. Maybe can you share in terms of your breakdown of IPO proceeds? How are you going to utilize them, and how much going into business growth? The question about paring down debt, I don't think there's also no offer for sales. There's no paring down debt. So I think you can explain in a bit more depth in terms of the utilization.
So out of that 100%, we're going to spend 16% of that growing the R&D for our IP portfolio, and 44% of that for R&D of IC products. So IC products would be AI and high performance computing platforms, for example, and the 2.5D and 3D products that SK mentioned just now. So combined, this 60% will be focusing on R&D of IP and also IC products. Right? Then on top of that, we will spend roughly about 5% in terms of expansion of our operational facilities. This will be R&D office spaces, sales offices in Japan, for example, and US, because these are markets that we want to go into. Another 11% will be spent on compute infrastructure. So when we do R&D, our R&D activities, these are run on essentially server rooms that we have. So we have to spend purchasing servers, purchasing network equipment to support our R&D activities. Another 10% is spent on EDA tools. When we do designing, we require to license or to subscribe to electronic design automation software, EDA tools. So these are the software tools we essentially do our IC design on. Right? The final 9% is for working capital, and I think there's another 4% more that's for spending on the IPO and expenses. So that makes up the 100%.
All right, thank you so much. And I think this question is wow, that's a long, very long question. Okay, so he's asking about your IP licensing revenue and also your custom ASIC project. The basically is asking about your revenue segmentation. How many percent from which segment and so forth.
Okay, I think also again you can see this in the prospectus, but I can talk about our latest full financial year. Our latest full financial year, about 70, I think about 70, slightly above 70% is silicon IP, about 26.7% is custom ASIC, and the remaining is a small percentage of others.
Right, and this has also, well, Dato has talked about diversification, right? This has also changed in terms of the contribution from last time 100% from silicon IP.
That's right. Yeah.
Now to more different products. Perhaps we can see even more diversification in the future, as Dato mentioned just now. I think this part, the question, second part of the question is actually asking about the top 3 to 5 clients concentration, but we talked about that just now. Maybe you can talk about are you allowed to talk about Intel Foundry Accelerator IP Alliance? How much of revenue is from there? I don't think we can.
I don't think we can talk about that. We can talk about a beverage because Intel Foundry is one of the emerging foundry and offer very advanced process technology. So being in the IP alliances allow us to access the process technology, not only for IP, potentially also can for our products.
Right. Okay. Okay, I think a couple of questions that a lot of questions has been answered. All right, I think there are some confusion in terms of the business model, right? How different is on a very high end, very high technical, what we call IP design, as compared to post validation services that are in the industry.
Okay, I think I'll try to give an analogy. For a company like Skyechip, you can imagine that we are J.K. Rowling. Right? We have our IP or our product, just like J.K. Rowling. They have the Harry Potter series, right? So our IP is like the story that J.K. Rowling created, right? So that is J.K. Rowling's IP. So after he created the story, he can actually sell the story as book, the storybook, millions of copies at very low cost. Right? So for us, we also design our IP one time and we can actually license it to multiple customers without additional R&D costs. Right? So that's the business of being an IP owner and running on IP licensing. Right? Same also for silicon products. Once you have designed a silicon product and qualify it, we can sell hundreds, thousands, or millions copy of that silicon products without having to invest in R&D. We only invest in cost of sale, just like J.K. Rowling, right? After he created a story, the cost of the book is only paper and ink or the printing cost, right? There's no longer, you don't have to spend another 3 years or 5 years to write a storybook because that same storybook can multiply and scale, right? And it's different from design service. Design service to me, I will say that it's like a typist who typed the storybook for J.K. Rowling. No matter whether the story sells for 1 million copies or 10 copies, he only charged a fixed fee. Right? he will not get additional pay because the book was a blockbuster, right? So, and after he completed the typing one book, he have to find another book to type in order to generate a revenue, right? So I hope it created some analogy that you can use
Yeah.
comparing to post-silicon validation services, which is part of service design services, compared to a company have your own IP and products.
Yeah, I would say that it's very different in terms of scalability,
Yeah.
the potential scalability. Right, we are at 8:27 now. I will take two last final questions before we end the session. Now, maybe this one last question, right? Based on your years of experience, how strong can you say the company is in terms of pricing competitiveness?
That's another good question. And it also differentiates between a company that provides services where your only differentiation is actually how much you charge the customer, right? But for IP company and for product companies, it's not the cost that differentiate you or earn you the competitiveness. It's a technology leaderships. It's an innovation that you put into your solutions. And it is also how you address the customer need that create the value, right? So I would not say that we don't face any price pressure, but I think it's more important that we focus on keeping our technology edge rather than worrying about how cheap should we sell, right? We are less cost sensitive compared to other part of business.
Right, right. Okay, I think that's a very good answer. Now, that comes down to our final question. For those who are watching live now, appreciate you joining us. Hope you are having dinner alongside with this live. And for those who are watching the replay, Dato and also Galvin, you have anything to say to the potential investors or people already subscribed? Any final remarks to share?
To me, when I founded Skyechip together with my partners, we are here not only to build a business ourselves. Actually, we are trying to help to move the Malaysia semiconductors activities from the assembly and test into the high end or the upper end of the ecosystem, which is IC design. We believe that we have the talent and we have the technology and we have the market for Skyechip. And this is not only an investment on Skyechip, but it also an investment on Malaysia's ambitions in advanced IC design.
All right. Galvin, you have anything to add?
I think as Skyechip, you know, the market is there, like SK mentioned, the market is there, and with the team to continue executing, and as we continue to execute and we continue to grow, we hope to be able to partner with investors, right, yourselves, institutional investors alike, to be able to grow this company longer term, right? So do stay with us as long-term investors, right? And we hope to be able to continue executing and to growing in this market going forward.
Yeah, what I can hear is the company is here to stay. Yeah, for many, many years. All right, I think that concludes our session today. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining our session today. And for those who are watching a replay, I hope this session has been insightful for you, especially in clearing the air on what Skyechip is doing and also their future expansion plan. Now, just once again, a quick disclaimer that today's session is purely for educational purposes only, and you are liable for your own investment choices. If you do need any investment advice, please consult a professional. Right? Thank you so much for Dato and also Galvin's time. Thank you so much. It has been very insightful. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. I'll see you in the next IPO briefing.